Hey there and welcome to this special Vectric video. So today Todd and I are together. So normally with these YouTube events we're separate. Todd is live and I'm live in the chat answering questions or vice versa. But today we thought we'd be together to talk about something that we've been working on for quite a long time now.
Exactly, that's right. So just a couple weeks ago we released version 11 of our software and we're super proud of it. And we thought we'd get together and have a chat about some of the features that we really like and maybe describe them a bit for you in the end. So let's get started.
Okay, so we're going to kick off this session by talking about one of my favourite features that have been added in to this release, and that is multi-sheet support. So in Pro software, we've always had the ability to work with sheets, but purely as a result of using the nesting feature, where if we nested our parts and they couldn't all fit onto one sheet, the software will automatically create an identical sheet that's of the same material thickness, the dimensions, and it will spill those extra vectors or parts onto that sheet. But now we can actually manually create our own sheets, and so this really opens up a lot more opportunity, especially with projects like multi-material projects. So for example, if we take a look at an old projects that I've done before, so this is the Christmas countdown, and this is the very kind of basic version of a multi-material project. We've got two different materials we're working with. We've got the base and we've got this chalkboard that's inlaid into our part. Now, in terms of the file setup for that previously to version 11, we'd have to create a file. So we've got the file here, and that's of the base, and then we'd have to copy a vector that represents the inlay over into a brand new session. So we'd have to open a new session, set that up, bring our vector in, and run through the toolpaths on both files, and we're constantly switching back and forth between the files, and that's just on a two-part project. So there are projects out there that consist of lots of different elements, and so you can imagine the amount of different files that you might be having up at the same time and having to switch between. And so what I kind of like about the sheets capabilities, we can see all of those sheets in one single session. We can create our own sheets, we can give them different thicknesses, different dimensions. We can also look at altering the origins of the sheets as well. And kind of one of my favourite things as well is what I like about this is you can almost create your own design space. So you work on your kind of your core sheet to begin with to draw up the project. And once you're happy with the design, that's when you can kind of feed that off to their relevant sheets that you want to machine with.
And this as well is one of my favorite features because it's going to change, or it has changed, the way I work in our software. When it came to actually designing and making this version 11 project, I did the whole layout on one sheet and then broke it out into different sheets that consist of different materials, different thicknesses, different sizes, all kinds of different things. And it made life a whole lot easier than me trying to maintain a directory full of stuff and having to figure that all out. So no, it definitely has changed the way I work with our software.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that that's quite a complex project, and you can see how that would have really been useful in that respect. But yes, so for all the software you can copy vectors or models if you've got models over to different sheets, but for users that are using Aspire or Pro software, you can really take advantage of the nesting feature as well. So we have the ability to nest two various sheets where you can choose whether you want to keep the original data on your sheet, or you can just choose to nest it to the different sheets if you wanted to. I think the advantage of keeping it on your sheet is your design doesn't change, and you can go back to that should you want to make any tweaks further down the line. Okay, so sometimes you might want to salvage your material, so rather than have it all thrown away, we can really take advantage of the space that we've got left to nest our parts to, and you can use a vector boundary and choose what sheet that goes to, and then again the overspill of that can go to whatever sheet you choose to if you wanted to. So I just think that it's such a nice feature, and having it all in one space and to be able to see the visibility of your toolpath previews as well is super handy then switching between various files.
Oh, it's great. It's a great feature. Rebecca and I, both being sculptors here, one of the great new features of version 11 is being able to save off and use custom sculpting brushes. Before you just had the round blob that you could use, but now you can use any component that you create as a brand new sculpting brush. Easy to do. Any model, any component that you create, you just need to right click on it down in your component tree and save it off as a sculpting brush, and it will go right with all your other sculpting brushes. And when you go ahead and decide you'd like to deposit or remove material using some of your sculpting tools, then you can go ahead and click the box that says use component brush, and then you can select whichever brush you want. Maybe it's to add in some feathers, maybe it's to add in, like I did here, some waves into my our version 11 project, just things like that, things you couldn't do before easily. In your example that you did, you could add feathers onto a duck, which is kind of nice.
It gives you a lot more like control over the brush strokes that you make, as opposed to just round curving kind of shapes.
That's right, and what's also nice about it is when you create one of these brushes, you can choose to rotate it if you would like to, using a little slider here, so you can rotate it around and get in the right angle. Again, when I was creating these waves, it was nice to rotate it just slightly so they looked a little bit more natural and not so made. And one thing that's interesting about that sculpting brush, I made it specifically for that because of the way it's shaped, and that's actually available for you in the, I believe, with what you can download.
Yeah, we have 20 brushes that come with the software to get you started with custom sculpting.
There's some really good ones in there. It's really great. Now another thing we can do is you can choose dynamic rotation. So as you move or as you sculpt across your job, then it will actually rotate the brush in the direction that you're moving your mouse or your stylus. Like in my case, I use the stylus, so it's always kind of handy, and that way you can create really kind of nice flowing shapes and so on.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Because it knows exactly the direction that you're going in according to the way you're moving your mouse. Or as we do sculpting a lot, we always recommend you use a pen to do sculpting to get more of a natural feel to that. But going back to, so not using dynamic rotation, my favourite little shortcut key is using the R button and using the scroller of your mouse. That enables you to manually rotate your brush as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's good as you're moving along. You just want to make a slight little change to your brush angle, you can go ahead and do that, which is nice. And we also have the new option of being able to merge in your strokes. Before, it just kind of added on top of things. So let's say, for instance, you were going to create a brick wall and your brush strokes happen to be on top of each other. Then before, it would get added on top, but now it gets merged in and makes it much more natural. Now I've got 3 really nice tips that I'd like to kind of share with you about doing this or using this tool. One is that you can use any 3D clip file at all that you've created in the past. You can go ahead now and use that as a sculpting brush, which is great. So things you've done, you can go ahead and reuse if you'd like. When you go ahead and choose your brush, you can also choose bitmaps if you would like to, and the software will automatically go ahead and create a brush for you. So if you're going to put a texture, let's say a sand texture like I did here, that was actually just a bitmap of some sand. I could go ahead and stamp in the sand using the merge, and I could fill that in nicely. It does look very organic. And the last one is that if you can't quite get your brush big enough, again, like with this foot that I used here, then I could stamp it down on its own level, and then I could go ahead and choose that component, and then I could scale it up and make it as big as I needed to fit on my beach, so I could get a good machining result in the end. Anyway, this is a game changer, I think, for all you guys out there that like to make your own, do your own sculpting or make your own components from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. It's just nice to have that ability to customize your brushes.
So I think we're both in agreement that you need to get in there and try these brand new custom sculpting brushes.
Yeah, for sure. Right, and so moving on to another huge improvement that we've made to Aspire, and that is the ability to segment third-party models. So previously, when you imported third-party models, so what do I mean by third-party model? We're talking STLs, OBJs, those sorts of things. So when you imported those, we were actually quite limited on how we brought the model in for machining. We could set up the initial orientation, we could set the model size and that sort of thing. But I dare say that quite a lot of us kind of stumbled across the little issue that we had of having vertical walls where there would have been undercuts. And so our development team have put together a lot of tools in this feature to really help us to try and eliminate the undercuts that we will have by importing them into the software at this stage before we bring them in. And so just taking a quick look, so everything is kind of the same as it was before when you initially import your model. You'll notice now that we've got these rings, and these rings enable us to just manually move your model into position in the 3D view, which is handy if you wanted to just make those kind of fine adjustments. But we have this option at the bottom now, which is the ability to segment our model. So what do we mean by segmenting? So segmenting, we can actually break up our model into parts that we can then machine, and then we can kind of assemble again. But the whole point of it is that we're really reducing those undercuts or those vertical walls that was kind of problematic before. And we can do this by simply slicing and dicing our models. So I'm going to look at this example. So this example we've got is of the seagull. Now, if you've not watched the 3D segmenting tutorial, I highly recommend that you take a look at that. It's quite a lengthy one, but it tells you everything that you need to know about segmenting. And it talks about the planes and how we can move them. So the really nice thing is that we can take these planes, we can see them in the 3D view, we can use the gizmo, we can rotate our planes, so we can really, we have total control of how we chop up these 3D models ready to bring into the software. And once you're happy with where your plane is, you can simply just go ahead and segment it. Whereby you can continuously make further edits to your model and continuously break up the parts. And the real handy thing we've got is our layout mode. Now, layout mode basically shows us what our parts would look like if we was to bring them into the software. And a real super handy thing that we've added in is this highlight undercuts option. And if you check that basically the software is telling you, hey guys, right, everything that's in pink here is going to be a vertical wall. So we could look at chopping our model further from this point to really reduce that. So the whole point of this is we want to reduce those undercuts, those purple areas. And so you can continuously further segment your models to really remove all of those undercuts. Some nice things with our viewer, we can change the name of our segments. You'll realise that the more you break apart your model, your tree is going to get bigger because you're going to have lots more parts to deal with. So we can name them. We also have the ability to heal, and I know that you're a fan of this, aren't you, Todd? So if you chopped something up that also chopped into another part of your model, but you still wanted to keep that part, for example, the underside of this seagull, we don't want it to be part of the legs, we want that to be part of the body itself. Well, we can take that and just drop that back into the body, and then it's kind of healed that, hasn't it? So, and it really gives you more control over those segments that you make. I'm a super fan of this. I think that when you're working with projects like this, because some models can be quite quite tricky to break up, well, to have worked with previously until now. Exactly. But now it kind of opens up more different models that we can bring in, break apart, bring them into the software, machine them, and then kind of assemble them together again.
I know a lot of those 3D models that you find out there are mainly used by 3D printers, but now you can up your game because now you can actually segment them up and make them huge where your friends can only make them teeny weeny. So it does make those very usable and less handwork afterwards. You can do all that ahead of time, which is kind of really nice. So yeah, it's great. I love the healing thing, like you mentioned. Sometimes you can't get that plane exactly where you want it to be, so you cut off a piece of something else. And now you can just put it back on where it belongs. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. So we're a fan of that one. And if you want to learn more about that, then just take a look at the Import 3D Modeling tutorial, which is the 3D segmenting version.
Let's now take some time to talk about some of our new features that we have with our 3D roughing and our 3D finishing toolpaths. The first two we're going to talk about are kind of interesting because they came from input that we received from customers in our Vectric user forum, which if you're not part of our Vectric user forum, I definitely suggest you get in there because you can not only learn from other users, but you can also pitch in ideas for new features or how we can make things even better. And like these two, that does make its way into the software, which is really kind of nice. The first one is with our 3D roughing toolpath, you can now skip already machined areas, which is perfect. One of our users was noticed that we were cutting over areas that we weren't removing any more material and it was a waste of their time. So now we can go ahead and choose that option and you can skip those areas, saving yourself tons of time in the end, possibly. The second one is you can actually change the angle of your raster 3D roughing toolpath, which may seem a little odd, but at first, before this version, we can only select X or Y. But some people, or one of our users, has a small format CNC machine and needed to angle their material at an angle to fit it all in there, or they'd have to do some toolpath tiling, which is what they didn't want to do. So being able to actually change the angle of their raster not only saved them time, gave them a better 3D roughing toolpath, and it also put a little bit less wear and tear on their finishing tools when it went in to remove that extra material, which is really kind of nice. So, and the times for that are equal to what you'd have essentially with skipping areas that you've already machined, and you get a really nice finish in the end. Now let's talk about the last one, which has to do with our 3D finishing. And now we can go ahead and do what we call rest machining. So you can choose a smaller cutter than your original finishing cutter, so you can get in and get those little teeny details. And I did that in our version 11 project. When we were cutting the back of this, which is really kind of nice, I did it all with a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill, and then went back in, and with our software, it went in and decided where I could get the best results with our 1/8 inch ball nose end mill, and everything worked out really well. I got all that extra detail. So essentially all you need to do is when you're going to go ahead and choose your 3D finishing toolpath, you go in and choose your largest cutter and then a smaller cutter, and the software will automatically go in and create your two toolpaths. Let's say you just choose two tools, and it'll create you a clearance toolpath or an initial toolpath, and then it'll go back in and it will remove some of that or show you some of that finer detail. And you've got some extra tools in there where you can fine tune that if you'd like to, but we set you up with some pretty good numbers to start out with. But don't hesitate if you're not getting the results you want to play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, I think for rest machining, the way that we did it before was such a rigmarole, especially really you could do it properly in a spire. You had to get a toolpath, you had to get your toolpath preview and create a component from that preview and then kind of create another toolpath on top of that. Now it's just, here are my tools, set user settings, and there we go, it does it for us. It's just super handy.
Oh yeah, and you get all that little extra detail that you may have been missing before, and it's just really is quite a nice little tool. It's great.
Okay, and Todd, so on to another favourite of mine. Now, that's the ability to resize your vectors on an individual basis. Now, Todd, you know that I've done quite a lot of slot together projects in the past.
A lot.
And so this is why I really like this feature. So I think it's going to really help people to pick up these kind of projects. So for example, this is a basic tablet holder. We've got two slots here that kind of slots in and Bob's your uncle. And when we release these files, I always say you need to change the slot sizes according to the material thickness that you are using. And depending on the complexity of the project, it can be quite a bit of time to take to actually change all of those slot sizes. Well, not anymore. So in our set size tool, we've added the ability to scale items individually. So you can have a set of slots or circles or whatever it is that you want to change. And originally we would resize this based on this selection, and with that selection it will kind of take the bounds of everything that's in your selection and then it will scale it from there. Well, now we've introduced the ability to scale items individually, and so it will scale everything in your selection on an individual basis, which makes it much easier to change things like slots for a slot together project. And so you can alter any part of the size, whether that's the width or the height, by the actual value, or you could even do that by percentage as well.
This is great for those who make cabinets who have countersunk holes and they want to change the head size. They can just select them all and it'll actually scale up from the inside of that circle out, as opposed to doing everything. Also, if you were going to create like some wall art or a grill for the front of a speaker, you can select all the holes and it will actually just make them all the same size, which is just fantastic. It's really good.
Yeah, perfect for circles. Yeah, I think it's one of those that's going to make things to change, changing the size of your vectors a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's talk about nesting components. Before we couldn't nest components, you can only nest vectors, is that correct? That's right. So now what we can do is you can select not only vectors but also components. And I think what's kind of nice about this is I can think of all kinds of different uses for this. My example here is actually taking the baby's first Christmas ornament, laying out some text in it, putting some of the text in a text box, and that way, if I make a whole sheet of these, I can easily go in and change the names of each one individually and so on. So all I need to do is go in and select everything I want to nest, go into the nesting feature, tell it what I want to do with it, choose the number I'd like to, and even tell it what sheets I want to put it on, like you had mentioned earlier. Then if I go, it'll just automatically go ahead and nest those onto these sheets for you. And in my particular case, you'll notice that the first page is blank. I don't know why. I said, you know why. It's that way for a reason. It's because maybe I want to leave some vectors behind or leave some components behind on that sheet, and I don't want that to delete or go away. It just happened to be in my example, it was left blank in the end.
Okay then, so we've added the ability to swap sides in a two-sided job. So I don't know about you, Todd, but there's been times in the past where I've created a two-sided project. It could be very involved, it could have models in, created the toolpaths for both sides, and then it isn't until I get to the stage where I want to save out those toolpaths, and then I think actually I'd like to machine the top side first or the bottom side first, whichever, and I want to kind of change my orientation of everything around in terms of where I set my Z according to which side we're on, and it's been a bit tricky to do that because you have to manually move everything to one side and then move everything from the other side to the other side. Now it's just a simple case of going into your edit options and then hit the button to swap sides, and the software does it all for you. It's super easy.
Oh, it's great. And if you want to take a single-sided job and convert it into a two-sided job, but yet that single-sided job really is the back side of your second, then you can just automatically flip it to the back and off you go. It's Bob's your uncle, I would say.
Yes, it's a good one.
Some of you might remember that back in our worldwide online user group meeting we did last year, I showed you how to sculpt and model a gorilla's head from scratch, which was kind of an interesting demonstration. But then I also took that and showed you how to use our 3D relief slicing to create the slices that I needed to cut on our machine in the thickness of material that we had. And this is Gary right here. And this is the second version that we cut. The first one we all did in full gray, but this actually shows you the different slices that we actually came up with to put them back together. Now that worked really well, except for there were some problematic areas that I had to get around different ways. But now with some of our new tools that we have in our 3D relief slicing dialog, we can get around those a lot easier now. So to start out with, we can now go ahead and adjust the variable thickness of our slices, and it's all very visual. You can see it in our 3D view where it's all colored properly. We also have our slice height bar there, so you can see it all there. So all you need to do is just select the number of slices you want or the thickness of material you'd like to have as the slices fit into, and then it will automatically go ahead and set you up with a starting point, and that is just a starting point. Now that might be perfect for you, but if not, you have the power now to go in and change those thicknesses or even add in more slices if you want. It's very interactive. You can do it in the 3D view or right on the slice bar if you want to. You just go ahead after that, you're all done, and go ahead and click slice the model, and you'll get all the parts that you need, just like you did before. My top tip here is that you can take, if for instance you can't get one of your slices to fit into the material thickness that you need, that's okay. Go ahead and do your slicing and then come back and choose that 3D component and then reslice it to fit inside your material. Or if you're really lucky, you might have a piece of material kicking around your shop that you can go ahead and use for that particular piece.
Yeah, I think the one thing I really like about this is the kind of the interactivity in the 3D view, how we can have more control over those slices. And the other thing that I like as well is before we've always sliced from bottom up, but now we have the option to slice from top down as well, which is handy for those intricate pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And that would have helped with Gary in the end, because I would have had his nose actually the full thickness of the material, and the back slice may have been thin, but that's okay because I can change that by just giving it some shape height and so on. It won't affect the whole model. Now, if you're really interested in getting into this, we did a great tutorial video on 3D relief slicing. It's the Apple video, if you know that one. We get right into all the different things that you need to know to use this properly, but I really highly suggest if you're into making full size or large scale pieces using things that maybe you've downloaded and imported in the STL and segmented ahead of time, now you want to slice those up to fit into your material, then this definitely is the one that you want to get into. And I tell you what, it's going to add a whole lot of fun and interaction to your software. It's really a nice little tool.
Right then, okay, so Todd and I have started our careers here at Vectric, all with thanks to the 3D modelling work that we've done for Design and Make. And so I was super excited to hear that not only has there been improvements made to the sculpting tools that we spoke about earlier, but we've also added in some additional functionality to the Create Shape tool. And what we've added in here just really kind of opens up more shapes that we can make, and it really gives us more control over that as well. So what am I talking about? So in the Create Shape form, we have an additional profile option, and that is the ability to create a vector profile. So you can use a custom made vector profile to use for your shape. So no longer are we restricted to the domes, to the angles, to the straight walls. We can now create our own shapes, which really opens up a lot more possibilities to the shapes that we can create. And we can get some really interesting results, and very quickly as well. So I'm just looking at an example here, and this is using the file that we include for the Create Shape Guide tutorial. So if you've not watched that, it's a good one to take a look at, to just generally learn about this whole tool and everything that's in there. So looking at this file, there's lots of different shapes. We've got things like letters in there, we've got round shapes, blobs and that sort of thing. It kind of really highlights the different kind of shapes that we can make. And then with those custom vectors, how interesting those shapes can be. So we can take a look at your standard side profiles where you've got a leg and then you make your own profile on one side, and that basically kind of fills out the actual vector itself. But not only that, you can make use of kind of mirrored profiles as well, and you can get some really interesting shapes then. And not only can we create custom profiles, but we can also take advantage of another new option that we've added into the Create Shape form, and that's as part of the final height section, which is the sweep option. And the sweep option works perfectly with these custom vector profiles as well. And so this basically gives you the opportunity to take your profile and it will sweep it around the closed vector, where it kind of blends the profile inwards but without kind of distorting the original profile. And you can get some real nice shapes using a combination of both of those tools.
Yeah. Great new additions, great new additions. It's going to make modeling much more fun and much more creative in the end. For sure.
Yeah, and so to learn more about that, you can take a look at the Create Shape Guide tutorial. It goes through all of those new options.
Let's talk a minute about our Chamfer toolpath. Now, this is a toolpath that we introduced in version 10.5 of our software, and it's really handy for putting things like chamfers on the top of letters, or maybe creating countersunk holes for screws or whatnot. We had one of our beta testers in our Vectric user forum bring it to our attention that most of the time when they're creating these chamfers, they're not particularly using perfectly shaped V-bits. And so what you end up having is a funny little lip at the bottom and lots of extra cleanup to do. And they felt that if we could actually give them an offset where we could actually move over the center of their tool slightly, use more of the side of their tool to cut down the side of the chamfer or the angle of the chamfer, then we'd end up having a much better result. So I thought I would take that to the test. So what I did is I went into the labs and I made these, well, there's 2 pucks here in the end. This one here is an example of using a broken V-bit. So obviously it had a flat bottom on it, and just ran the chamfer toolpath without an overcut. And you'll see that, first of all, it's not a very clean finish. And there is a little tiny step at the very bottom where if you were trying to remove that by hand, it would be a real challenge to get rid of that, especially if you're doing a whole set of letters and so on. So this puck here is using an overcut, which is half the thickness of the broken end of the bit, and you'll see that I get a much smoother finish to the edge, and it's really quite clean, less cleanup. I don't have that little step there, and that worked out really, really well.
Yeah, look, you can just really tell the difference, can't you?
Yeah, it's amazing. I was a little unsure because I've never used it before, and with this example, you really can tell that using that offset really makes a difference. Now, one of the things I do want to point out about the offset is that your tool ends up going a bit deeper. Now, in this case, because they were raised parts and I was using a profile cut, they're both exactly the same in size, dimension, everything is the same because I've cut off that extra piece that went a little bit deeper than what I should have, but I get a much better finish on the end. So I think that's a really welcome addition to the chamfer toolpath, and I think that if you use it a lot, you'll really appreciate that nice little tweak again that came from some feedback from our beta user forum, which is great. Here at Vectric, we're always trying to make sure we give you the best toolpaths we can. And so quite often we'll go in and we'll make little changes to our toolpaths to either give you better times or better finishes in the end. And if you've ever used the pocket rest machining option, which would be using a larger and a smaller tool to clean out a pocketed area of a job, then this is going to be really important for you because it's going to save you a ton of time. And we just built it in, so you're going to take advantage of it right away. If you do stack text, the same thing, this is going to be super handy. So in my example right here, I actually created this file in version 10.5, calculated the toolpaths, and then loaded it into version 11. And then if you look at the times for the 2 toolpaths that were calculated in version 10.5, you'll see that it's an hour and 58 minutes to cut this particular part, which seems like a lot, which is fair. But then if I simply go ahead and recalculate those toolpaths in version 11, you'll see that we actually shave off 20 minutes of time and we get a much cleaner part in the end. And that's just all done under the hood for you guys to use right away. But it's a big change. If you do things like stack text or pocketing out different signs and so on, or just pocketing out things for inlays and so on, then this certainly will come in handy, give you nice crisp corners and so on, and save you some time. So any of you that use the molding toolpath before know how great a tool it is. I know I love it. I use it all the time on all of the projects that we give away for free. I think it's great. It gives you some really unique shapes really fast. Well, we've added now the feature that a lot of our other toolpaths have, which is being able to use the vector selector to be able to select vectors on different layers and be able to kind of pre-calculate the stuff ahead of time and then easily change up the vectors that are on that layer, and you can recalculate the toolpath really quick. So I thought I'd come up with an interesting example, kind of kicking around some ideas. And I thought that maybe if you own something like a frame shop, then what you might be able to do is offer your customer the option of taking a shape of a frame, but also giving them different profiles around the edge. Okay, so set up a file pretty easily. On one layer, you've got a bunch of different profiles. The next layer, you've got the profile that currently you offer, maybe as your default one. And then on the third layer, you've got your actual profile of your frame or plaque or whatever it happens to be. You can simply go ahead and calculate your toolpath and associate the cross section with a certain layer, and then of course the profile with a certain layer. And all you need to do now is just switch those up, so you can move the default one from your default layer to the offered options, and then take one from that level and move it, or layer, and then move it back up to that layer that you've associated your toolpath with. You recalculate it, and off you go. You can show your customer right away. And it's a really good way to use this molding toolpath in all sorts of different places.
Yeah, for sure, and it opens up the opportunity to save them out as toolpath templates as well.
Exactly, that's right, which is great.
That's
right, that's perfect. Yeah, saves lots of time and gives your customers all kinds of options, and they can easily see it. So that might be a good use for this, but it's there. So the vector selector has been added to your molding toolpath now.
Okay, so for version 11, we've greatly improved our online post-processor and machine management system. So what we're talking about, so When you first fire up version 11, you'll be given the opportunity to run through the Kickstarter wizard, and this wizard helps you get the software configured for you, so you can connect to your V&Co account, and then that's where you're able to access your clip art and that sort of thing. But not only that, we can also have the opportunity to install our CNC machines as well and get that configured into our software. And so with that machine management system, we're able to search online for our machine, and if it's available, we can install it, and it will install all of the configurations for that machine along with post-processors for that particular machine as well. So it's all kind of like done automatically for you. And if you're connected to the net as well and you choose to use the latest post, if ever a post processor was updated for your machine, your software will automatically update that post processor to the latest version as well.
Oh, hold on, Rebecca, you're telling me that it does it automatically, I don't need to do it?
Yep, absolutely. So if you've got that set to the latest, the software will just do that in the background. It just does that all for you. However, if you don't want to use the latest post, you can always revert back to a previous version if you wanted to. The options are always there for you to choose between. And not only that, so not only does the machine come with its post processors, it also comes with a set of default tool cutting feeds and speeds for a selection of materials for that particular machine, just to help you get started as well.
Oh, it's great for the new user, new to CNC person who really is new, totally fresh to this sort of thing. It's a great way to start. Perfect.
Totally. Okay, so this section of the review is called How Was It Never There Before? Where we're going to look at features that have only just been added into version 11.
But it'll definitely improve how we work with the software, and these little gems are going to save you a ton of time.
Okay, so we're going to start this one off by looking at the spell checker. So we've now introduced the spell checker to various text entry fields in the software. So we're looking at the create text tools along with the project and tool database notes fields. And so when you're creating text in any of those areas, if you spelt something wrong, that classic red wiggly line will underline the incorrect words that you spelt wrong. Well, you have the opportunity to right click on that to locate the correct word from the Vectric dictionary. And so this, I think, is going to help a lot of people save time and material. So just browsing the Vectric forum, there's been classic examples of you realising your spelling errors once you've machined those parts, and I'm sure we've done that ourselves, haven't we, Todd?
Definitely. Yeah, and I being one of the worst spellers ever, I really do appreciate this and been waiting for this for a while now. So, but is it only available in English or other languages?
No, so whatever language you are using, it picks up the spelling for those languages as well, which is super useful.
If you're like me, you love to kern your text. You love to make sure the spacing between each letter is perfect. And up until now, you could only do one at a time. But now what we can do is we can actually adjust the spacing between all the letters in your line of text in one click. So all you need to do is hold down your Alt key while you click, and it will automatically shorten the space. If you hold down your Shift and Alt, it will expand the spacing between all the letters in that line of text. A great time saver, and let me tell you, I love using it all the time. It's great.
Yeah, it's an ultimate time saver. Okay, Todd, so I don't know about you, but have you ever imported a 3D model, you've gone through the whole orientation setup, and then you've brought it into the software to find out it's not quite the right angle that you wanted it at, and you've got to delete the model, and then you've got to start all over again, re-import it, bring it back in. Wow. We've got a solution for that. So you can now right click on your imported components and use the option to re-import, and it's going to take you back into the import stage where you can adjust or make those fine little tweaks to and adjustments to the orientation of the model to then bring that back into the software.
Does it work with segmenting?
It does.
Oh,
yeah. So
nice.
It does. So if you've segmented your model, which is super useful for this, because if you've made lots of segments, the ability to go back in, all of your segments are still as they were before you imported them.
Nice, I like that a lot. Good one.
Me too.
Group Beziers. This is one that I've wanted for a long time. When I go in to create the vectors to model something, typically I'm tracing a bitmap. Well, to be able to draw straight spans around the object that I want to trace and then go ahead and turn those into Beziers was the way I've always done it. But now what I can do is I can go in and group select all those nodes and press B on the keyboard, and all of them turn into Beziers. So it's B for boom, not B for Bezier now. I love this one.
Right, and so when drawing vectors with the polyline tool or the draw curve tool, we can now undo each span that we make with that tool, which is super handy if you're anything like me and you're kind of want everything to be almost perfect first time round. You just hit that backspace key and you can go back through your points and then kind of start again.
Oh, I love that. It's a good one. It's a really good one.
Okay then, so layers. So quite often in the past, if I'm importing DXF files or various vector files, quite often you get lots of different layer information that's not really relevant to the thing that you want to do in the software. So there's been times before where I've imported vectors and I have about 20 layers that have no data on whatsoever. And so to delete those layers was quite a process. You had to go in individually to delete each one on an individual basis. Well, now we've added various options to delete our layers. So you can right click on your layers to say you want to delete all visible layers, invisible layers, and also have the option to delete empty layers as well. So the software will just find all of your empty layers and just remove them all, which is perfect for those sorts of import issues.
Definitely a huge time saver, definitely. So if you're a fan or you use the laser cut module for your software, you'll know all about the laser cut and fill toolpath that we have. We've added a few new options in there. The first two I'm going to talk about are fill together or fill regionally. So if you make a selection of closed vectors, you now have the choice to how you want the laser to actually fill in those areas. So you can fill them together, which essentially means it's going to do them all at one time, or you can fill them regionally, which will mean, like in the case of using the word kern, it'll actually choose each letter individually and fill in the letter and then move on to the next one. And we've also added in whether or not you would like to leave the outline around your actual objects that you're laser filling. And that's a perfectly great use for creating things like drop shadows. So you can think of the example of having the text kern burned in there at 100%, looks really nice and sharp. Then you go ahead and angle your text backwards, do a little bit of work in your vectors, and then fill those without an outline with maybe a 20% laser power, and you get a really nice looking drop shadow. It's really simple and it's a nice effect in the end for your finished products.
Yeah, definitely. You can get some real nice shading effects from it.
Exactly, yeah, it's a great update.
Okay, so that kind of finishes our talk on the version 11 features. So if you wanted to have a closer look at features for yourself and to try them out, then simply head over to vectric.com where you can download the free trial program for any of our core products. If you've got any questions, then please leave them in the comments below and we'll be sure to get to those. If you've got questions that are more technical or you're looking for advice as well, please feel free to head over to the Vectric forum. We've got a whole community of people there that are always willing to help everyone out, so it's always good to post on there, as well as seeing your projects as well. So if you've got any projects that you've machined using version 11, we'd love to see those as well, so share them on the Vectric forum, as well as tagging us across our social media channels.
Exactly. Now we'd like to thank all the Vectric team for all the work they've done on this release. It's been a great release so far. We want to thank all of our beta testers. They took time out of their own schedules to get in there and try the software and make it even better than it was. And we want to thank you for supporting us through this whole journey. It's been amazing, and this version is really great as far as we're concerned. It's lovely. Up next week, we're going to have Tim Sway on our YouTube Live, and he's going to be presenting a project where he's going to use the multi-sheet feature that Rebecca and I are all excited about. He's going to show us how he used it to develop his project. Now, after that, we've got our Worldwide User Group meeting that we're hosting online again this year. So if you haven't signed up, we really recommend that you go over and sign up. We've got lots of great presentations from Vectric staff and also from special guests sharing all kinds of great ideas, and from project making to project finishing. It's going to be a great event, so get signed up.
Yeah, I look forward to that. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then please hit the subscribe button for instant updates on the latest videos that will be releasing. Thank you for watching.
So keep having fun.
And happy making.